What's up everybody, Jack Four here on behalf of Box to Box Football, and coming off the recent announcement of the intention of those 12 breakaway teams to enter a European Super League, I've got a couple of things I just want to talk to you guys about. First of all, we have a lot to unpack here. And in this video, I'll be honest with you, I'm absolutely terrified of missing something or not covering certain points. So what I'd say to you, when this does come out, if you do have any questions or anything of that nature, drop it in the comments section. I'll try and answer what I can. Firstly, what I'd like to do is just do a little bit of background on myself and maybe the reason why this video is coming out. First of all, I have an undergraduate degree from UCFB in International Football Business, where a number of different factors surrounding the European Super League I have personally studied and produced pieces of work on. I'm not for a second going to try and sit here and tell you that I'm the all-seeing and all-knowing face of football and that everything I say is gospel. Not for a second. One thing I do believe though is that I'm a little more educated than most on this kind of a topic, and I believe in this video, all I want to do is be able to put a few points across to maybe make you think differently about this whole terrible situation. So, to begin with, I think we need to do kind of a state of the union, a where are we now, so to speak. So let's start there. We're in a terrible situation. This is going to be my first topic regarding the European Super League, and guys, like I've said, I'm not trying to sell it to you here, trying to get some points across what football could become if it does go ahead. First of all, let's take a look at the governing bodies who are so against the ESL and why that might be and what that might be. First of all, FIFA. Now, FIFA have a rotten contemporary history, looking back at the corruption cases in 2015, the questionable Russia and Qatar World Cup bids, slave labour and deaths, especially with regards to Qatar, turning a blind eye to major issues and using hollow performative activism to punish something like racism or anything of that nature. Again, I'd love to go into a bunch of detail on these things, but we really would be here all day. The point I'm trying to get across is these organisations are not whiter than white, cleaner than clean. They have plenty of room for criticism, plenty. Obviously working directly within the FIFA bracket is Uefa, along with the CAF, CONMEBOL, CONCACAF, etc., all the other federations. UEFA are the governing body which hosts notably the Champions League and Europa League and implements the financial fair play regulations and hands out sanctions for the teams that fall foul of that. To give you an example of this confederation mistreating certain teams or not treating teams fairly based on their financial position, Manchester City have broken financial fair play regulations multiple times, and most recently they were given a €30 million fine, which we have to keep in mind. A team like Manchester City, that is absolute chump change. This punishment was meant to be kind of restrictive of them and to really tell them off to not do it again. But we see them in the semi-finals of the Champions League this year, UEFA's biggest competition. To me, doesn't really sound like they've been punished. The other example in contrast to this is Birmingham City, who are found to have broken FFP rules and received a 9-point deduction for breaking these regulations. That's not nearly the extent of what Manchester City did, and Manchester City, it was not the same level of punishment. This ended up derailing Birmingham City's season. How is that possibly fair? I'll tell you why this happened. FIFA, UEFA, they pander to these big teams and they let them off because they know that is the money, that is the draw. Manchester City are one of those teams. They are their cash cow. Notice, we've already started talking about money. FIFA and UEFA, they need to keep these big clubs sweet with these empty threats and punishments so they can grow and draw more and more money for the organisations themselves. It's always been about greed and corruption. It's not suddenly become this way, it's been this way for decades now. Going down the chain a little further, the Premier League are hardly kind of hidden from blame here either. Their poor communication and reactionary thinking throughout the pandemic and prior has damaged football from the top to the bottom, and these 6 founding clubs are taking decisions into their own hands. A better run league, and this would not have happened. Lest we forget, the Premier League was based on money in the first place in 1992, and is solely based on the idea that you can make as much money as you want. You can develop and get to the levels that you aspire towards. This is why foreign investment has been so high. We've seen revenues, broadcasting and sponsorship deals skyrocket. The government has welcomed this investment too, citing jobs and opportunities for the football industry. Let me put this into perspective for you as well. The most financially fruitful football match in the world is the playoff final to enter the Premier League, where a winner can receive £170 million from winning just that one game. That figure actually rises to £300 million if they avoid relegation in their first season. Don't try and tell me it's about competition and the fans. It has always been about money. That money could be better spent lowering the price of the people's game. Surely a game which earns tens of millions more than the Champions League final could go towards other areas. But no, it doesn't. The money doesn't go to areas to make the game more competitive, to bring it back to the people. Don't buy this lie that the Premier League, Sky, BT and football associations tell you. It's a lie. Football ticket prices are higher than ever before. Shirt prices upwards of £70, £80. Charging £15 to watch West Brom versus Burnley in a pay-per-view style system. Don't try and tell me football was in a good position in the first place. It's a huge lie. The reason why all these entities are upset is because of their own financial losses. It's crocodile tears from these organisations, because when they turn the mirror back on themselves, it doesn't look so damn good. They don't care about you. They care about their wallets. And if they can get you on their side, they actually have a greater chance of making it not happen, keeping the status quo just the way it is. Remember, these are the ones who welcomed these billionaires in with open arms, with no thought on the future and what might happen to the people's game. On top of discussing, Sky and BT, I'd also like to address the pundits who are against this. They work for companies who are now going to be screwed out of a bunch of money by streaming services, maybe like, Netflix or Amazon, Disney, Facebook or Comcast. So of course everything you see on TV is going to be against it. It's hardly surprising. I don't know this for a fact, but I'm not going to be overly shocked if they have producers and directors in their ear telling them what to say. Some of the little monologues have been embarrassing as it is so far. Just like the stuff like, it's a disgrace. They just repeat themselves over and over again with no real detailed reason as to why that is the case. These are empty comments to please what the masses think they want to hear. I'd like to move on now to this argument of competitiveness. So let's move that conversation over there now. Since 1992, two teams outside of the big three in La Liga of Atletico Madrid, Real Madrid and Barcelona have won the title. That's Deportivo La Coruña and Valencia. In the Premier League, only two teams outside of this top six have won the Premier League in 30 odd years, that being Blackburn Rovers and Leicester City. One thing to mention and piggyback off the Premier League comment, Stefan Szymanski in one of his books, Money in Football, Soccernomics, which I recommend people read, they look at how only a team with a top four wage budget spend has ever won the league prior to a season actually starting. What this basically means is that you can rule out 16 members of the league from winning the thing. Now, Leicester City, more recently, they're a huge outlier. They're definitely the anomaly. But in all the other seasons, if you do not have a top four wage budget spend on players, you do not have a chance to win the league, historically speaking. I don't know about you guys, but that doesn't sound too competitive to me when you can basically predetermine which team's going to win the league. It makes the efforts of the other 16 teams borderline redundant. When there are certain teams who fall outside of this top six category and all they're hoping to do is maybe making a Europa League spot, maybe trying to avoid relegation, that to me is not competitive. Every single team should be going for the title every single year. But we know privately that that is not the case in these dressing rooms. To finish my point about the other two remaining teams, in Serie A, only 2 teams outside of the big 3 of the Milan teams and Juventus have won the Scudetto since 1992. Both Roman teams, Lazio and Roma. I could go on and on here, guys. So you might say to yourself, well, without so many variants of teams winning the title, what would that mean? Well, the point would be that by removing these teams to compete against one another, you remove the financial juggernauts out of these leagues and you have them compete with the other ones. It will be a far more competitive competition. What you are essentially doing is fighting fire with fire. If you take the top 3 teams in Spain, you take those 6 teams in England, you take the top teams in Italy, and you have them go against one another, it makes it far more competitive. In no single season could you predict who would actually win because the level of competition would be so high on a weekly basis. You are changing the least competitive game on any given week across Europe's top 5 leagues, say Barcelona versus Eibar, to Barcelona versus Arsenal. I don't know about you guys, but I know which one I'd rather watch. So, the more important part of the competitiveness argument is where does this leave the other leagues? Now, using England as an example, let's say these 6 founding members are kicked out. This would mean that from the Championship, 9 teams could be promoted to the Premier League. 9 teams who have worked hard, been given the opportunity to be involved in a league with a more level playing field. I think it is borderline impossible to select a Premier League winner, say, next season out of Leicester City, Everton, West Ham, Wolves, Leeds, Villa, Southampton. And the same would go for La Liga and Serie A. A more competitive platform for the richest teams and a more competitive platform for the less rich teams who will have an opportunity to play in the Champions League and the Europa League. Some of them for the first time in their history. Yes, you can argue that there'll be an asterisk on these victories. But as I've already stated, it's not like these teams were in a competitive format in the first place. One comment I hear a lot is that the broadcasting price will go down and there'll be less money in football because these big teams take some of the appeal away. As far as I'm concerned, that's a good thing. Football needs to be brought back to terrestrial TV on the BBC, ITV, Channel 4. We need to start giving the game back to the people, taking it away from the likes of Sky and BT. I'd like to mention this as an example because it's something I'll come back to later. The Champions League has actually had 145 different participants since 1992. Only 13 teams have won it. 13 different teams. That cannot continue. The relationship between money and football at this point cannot be denied. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer. There's far too much statistical analysis and data supporting this fact and this argument. European football has let the billionaires in, and we're all acting like it's some sort of shock that they are choosing to do this when the people they have to report to, governing bodies, FAs, etc., are incompetent. Let me ask you, someone who has never done the right thing in their lives does something wrong again. Are you really that surprised? Being outraged at this Super League idea is one of the most naive reactions I can think of in football to this day. Of course these owners don't care about football. Is this really surprising? Come on people, they don't care about you. And you and the entities around football have never done anything to stop them before. And it has potentially become too late now. They play too many games in competitions which don't matter. One example, I know James feels strongly about this, it's the FA Cup. That and the League Cup are treated like garbage by the big teams, because it does not benefit them. Yeah, okay, if Wigan can win it, great. If Birmingham can win it, great. But at the end of the day, if these teams don't care, it can't be considered competitive if teams aren't really trying to win it. That asterisk over a victory will still remain. You can talk about winning the Champions League without these big teams involved and there'll be an asterisk over it. There's already an asterisk over a bunch of competitions because the teams don't care to be involved in it. It kills the competition. Another argument I'd like to talk about and potentially dispel here is the money trickling down argument. And the problem at this stage is that there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know what the European Super League will actually end up being. But in terms of money trickling down, I'd like to mention this. Manchester United have historically overpaid for players due to the fact that they have more money than most. So selling clubs push them to their limits when selling their players. Additionally, I look at the Ousmane Dembele deal from Borussia Dortmund to Barcelona, which, if you guys have been watching me, you know I've always been very critical of, because Borussia Dortmund knew that Barcelona had a lot of money from Neymar leaving and a strong desire to sign players in that position, so they ended up overpaying for Ousmane Dembele. Now, with this as a background, I'd like to talk about the money trickling down to teams. Historically, there have been incentives and funding put aside to support clubs lower in the pyramid and also grassroots football, with the ESL clubs having significantly more money than the teams that remain in the pyramid. A situation will arise where an ESL club is attempting to sign a player from the Premier League. Let's use Norwich City as an example. They've just been promoted to the Premier League. If an ESL club wishes to sign a Todd Cantwell or a Max Aarons or an Emiliano Buendia, how much do you think they could realistically ask these clubs to pay for these players for their registration? It's not going to surprise me at all if we start seeing hundreds of millions of euros that are generated by these ESL clubs making their way into the football pyramid by these kinds of transfers. In turn, when Norwich in this example receive this money, it will go to signing players from other non-ESL teams, Championship, League One level players and teams. As long as these teams continue to develop talent, there will always be a need for the ESL teams to sign the best talent they can, which means money will still trickle down to the lower leagues. Guys, the gap is already there. Let's not pretend it's going to be fixed. The owners of these elite teams have over £100 billion in net worth, compared to League Two teams who are borderline going broke. The man on the street and the team he supports, there's a bigger gap than ever. Now, let's take a look at the alternative, the UEFA Champions League revamp. Let me ask you if these are things that you really want. UEFA recently came out with their revamp of the Champions League format, with some unbelievably questionable changes. Bloating the competition by adding more teams and 100 more games. If you think this is to increase the competitiveness, you are crazy. As a reminder, the Champions League has had 145 different participants since 1992. Only 13 different teams have won it. This cannot continue. This is another chance for the richer teams to destroy the smaller teams and make more money. Money. This is what UEFA are hoping for. They're just being less blatant about it than the ESL clubs. Another ridiculous addition from UEFA. They're epitomising hypocrisy by adding 2 slots allocated based solely on past performance to the clubs with the highest UEFA coefficient that did not qualify for the Champions League automatically but did qualify for another competition. To kind of make that a little clearer, maybe some layman's terms here, basically they're diluting a version of what the European Super League would be. Again, they don't care about the fan or fair competition. They care about making as much money as possible because the 13 teams that have won the Champions League will just continue doing it. We will never see an Anderlecht or a Slavia Prague win the Champions League again. It just won't happen. UEFA, all of these different organisations, they're trying to spin this like the bigger teams are trying to take the game away from you, while they have been taking the game away from you for decades. Okay guys, moving on to fans. Now, here is where I fully expect to receive the vast majority of my criticism, and you know what? Understandably so. It can be a very emotional, family-related business, football, so I'm not trying to offend anybody here. I'm just trying to get my point across. Football fans are what have made football what it is today. But we cannot pretend that globalization isn't going to be a huge factor in the change and future change of what the modern day football fan is. A fan used to be somebody who goes to games or reads about the result in the paper the next day. This is prior to the internet or television. Nowadays, the common football fan watches games either legally or illegally on their TV, phone, laptop, tablet, or at the pub, or just gets notification updates on their phones. The percentage of match-going fans compared to fans globally around the world watching the matches being broadcast is night and day. Football is the most global sport in the world. The idea that football should cater to the tens of thousands of fans who go to games every week and their feelings should be taken into account instead of the hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of fans in the 99.9% of other fans around the world is inherently selfish. This is hard for many people to hear. But as the game globalizes, who are you to say you deserve to watch your team play the way you want because you are amongst the top 1% of people in the world who has enough money to go to games, pay £6 for a beer at halftime and £4.50 for a pie? Those less fortunate than us are the majority in these times, and catering to their needs globally must be the goal. I would personally much sooner pander to the 99.9% watching around the world than the incredibly fortunate top 1%. The entitlement from fans is understandable, of course it is. But it's the same type of comment as, I built this country. It's like, okay, yeah, fine, sure you did, but we're going to be moving on without you. Yes, you are the people who made the game what it is. Of course you are. Football is nothing without its fans. I'm not even going to try and dispute that. But to have it never change due to some false sense of loyalty that's not been a part of the game for decades now is beyond me. Some kid in India, America, Japan wanting a different product to the one you're clinging onto, I feel as though is understandable at this stage. And the reason why I'm fully aware that this is hard to listen to is I know there are fans out there who have gone to games for 20 or 30 years, whose dads have gone to games for 50 years, whose granddads went to games for 60 years. I understand there's that connection, but things have to move forward, things have to progress, or else things get left behind. One thing I do want to kind of dispel as well, and this is me potentially being very cynical and skeptical, and I'm sorry to say this, but a boycott? Good fucking luck with that. With what the ESL will actually be able to offer the everyday fan, and the lack of a major alternative, I have no doubt if this gets off the ground, people will watch it. I will be watching it. I, for one, will be watching it. We shouldn't see YouTubers headline boxing events, but I don't see any boycotting of that. People are predictable, and largely, especially with anonymity, they'll go to the lowest common denominator. There's no accountability. I'm sorry to say this, but it's true. Part of the outrage I actually believe will be fantastic for football. If you're, say, a Liverpool fan, but you're from Reading, maybe you'll start supporting Reading. If you're a Chelsea fan and you're actually not from London, say you're from the South Coast, maybe you'll support Southampton, Pompey or Aldershot Town. They could really use your support, use your money, and will deliver the product and the experience that old-fashioned, traditionalist football fans are looking for. A couple kind of closing comments of optimism that don't really have much of a basis. The European Super League and also the leagues without these kind of major teams in, it could be a completely fresh start. Ref cams and microphones, making sure VAR works effectively and doesn't create more controversy. Resting players more so they don't have to play so many games. A change of the IFAB rules, the handballs, the offside, which we're always so frustrated with. There are so many areas which we complain about in football, and potentially without it being under the control of these governing bodies, there's room to improve our game, make it the best it can be. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's going to happen in the ESL. I'm just telling you it could. The bureaucracy in football historically has held it back for years, and the hope with the ESL is that it'll have a chance to bypass that, do things differently, do things better. A players' union. Like with a lot of American leagues, there can be a players' union, a powerful players' union, where they can come to certain agreements surrounding issues and topics which they can discuss with the league. This is usually referred to as a collective bargaining agreement. It happens in the NFL. This means that certain players' rights can be met as well as working with members and representatives of the players and the union to work on social issues, ongoing issues regarding the sport. A players' union will hold a lot of power over the ESL founding members and will hold them accountable for their actions, something we really haven't had that holds any real weight. There'll be incentives for poor performing teams to do better, instead of the best teams getting more money and then there being an even bigger gap between the top and the bottom. There's ways that you can actually make it better for the teams who lose to give them a chance to win the thing the next year. We've already seen rumours based on a wage cap in the ESL. This, by its very nature, would increase the competitiveness in the league for the ESL. The one thing I think I will say to traditional football fans before I make my conclusion here is, you can't have it both ways. You can't have a free trade capitalist system where you reward people for winning and then you don't reward people for losing, and then also expect equal outcome. Equality of opportunity will then give you the desired results of skill in management, skill in scouting, skill in coaching, skill in players, skill in running a football club. As I've said in the past, the comment section is always open. I'm always happy to have good spirited conversations with fellow football fans about these issues. I hope you kind of heard me out on this. Thank you very much for listening. Jack Farr, signing off. We'll see you next time.